I'm doing an interview with Nina because she has 1.3 million followers on Instagram and her titties hang out.
They're
It
not
makes it more
hanging
awkward.
out.
It is, in theory, really cool to have a woman involved in the UFC that isn't a fighter and executed poorly.
I'm not gonna lie. When it comes to discussing Nina drama, I think that her place in the MMA world is complicated. I think it's complicated for women. I think it's complicated for men. But I will ultimately say that I think she gets a lot of unfair hate. I will also say that as a woman, as someone who loves the sport, as someone who understands how women are not taken very serious in this sport, I can also understand some of the criticism. And so this video about Nina is not going to be me like bashing her because, to be honest with you, I'm subscribed to her channel. I think she's a good creator. I think that she definitely has some things that my cat always wants to join right when I'm filming. I think that there are some things to criticize when it comes to her and her content, but I also think that a lot of the hate that she gets is completely unfair. And that is something I want to talk about in this video, as well as maybe some of my own criticisms I may have of her, but also understanding her place as a woman within social media and especially within the UFC MMA space, where it can be very cutthroat. It can be very dismissive, and it can be also very challenging to navigate that whole world. And so, yeah, that's what I want to discuss in this video. So, here is the cool girl of MMA.
Is this your boyfriend right here?
Yes, that is.
He has to be the
No,
most
he does
confident
not.
man.
Okay, this is what people don't understand.
Whatever. So I like the fights. Doesn't matter boxing and kickboxing.
Oh, I don't like to put big black things in my face like this, but we'll make it happen.
I feel like you're used to it.
Have you ever been an MMA fighter before?
No.
What would it take?
In the world of MMA and UFC media, there aren't a lot of women, and the few that are there have to play a role, or they have to play the game. They have to play the game different than their male counterparts. They're expected to almost be one of the guys, to laugh at sexist jokes, to downplay things that would be considered harassment, to prove that they quote unquote get it. And when they don't, the internet reminds them or tries to remind them that they don't belong, or that they're not needed, or that they are nothing but their body and their looks. Nina Drama, or Nina Marie Danielle, I think it's Danielle if I'm saying it wrong, I'm completely sorry, built her brand right in the center of all of that. She's charming, funny, and confident. She's also has aligned herself with a lot of men who are very problematic and have even disrespected her on her own platform. Like I said in the intro, this episode is not going to be about bashing Nina or talking down, because like I said, I think that she definitely has a place within this MMA media space. It's about understanding really why she and many other women like her have to navigate misogyny in male-dominated media, and what happens when playing along becomes part of survival. Let's start with who Nina is, because I feel like a lot of MMA fans think that she kind of just like popped up out of nowhere. But Nina Drama is the online persona of Nina Marie Danielle. She's a model, former Playboy playmate, and now a UFC personality, reporter, and YouTuber. Her rise came with a unique combination of like humor and access. So I would say with Nina, you ever like think about those like comedic TikTokers or those comedic Instagrammers, right? Like people like King Batch or like Lele Pons, if you were around in the Vine days, like those people who do skits online. You could tell, like you can really see a shift within her Instagram where it's like she went from her modeling pictures and like being a model and then shifting over into making more comedic content. You see her actually collaborate with people like King Batch, right? And all those other very famous Instagram Vine creators who create skits online. And so she went from that to making skits about like WWE or making skits about like other, people within the sports world. And then it sort of like shifted into being all about UFC content. She even says in her interview with John Jones that John Jones was like followed her back in the time when she was just making comedy content within her social media. That was when people like John Jones first realized who she was her just making funny videos online. And that was really where her start happened. Then as she shifted more into making commentary, not making commentary, then after a while she shifted into, can I help you? Then her content sort of like shifted into being more funny about UFC or MMA type of content. That's also when she started incorporating more interviews with fighters. As she got more and more access to interviewing fighters, that's when her started to take over really where the direction of her career went. So she's been in the public eye for quite a while. Her rise came with a mix of, like I said, humor and access. She wasn't just interviewing fighters, she was making content with them, whether it's funny sketches, silly questions, quick interviews, where she got fighters to laugh, where she got fighters to joke around with her. Her content to me really showed a different side to these fighters. I mean, think about like a regular interview with an MMA fighter is usually, no offense to a lot of other journalists, it's a little boring. It's a lot of asking some of the same questions. It's a lot of like, how are you feeling? Are you ready for this Saturday? How do you think you're going to win against your opponent? How do you feel about your opponent? What do you think is your path and road to the title? Like, it's a lot of just like regular questions that they probably get asked about 15 different times the same day. And so her content was a nice little break from all of that. You're hearing them come out of their shell, asking them most random questions that are maybe like viral on TikTok. And I think that's really what grew a lot of the attention from the MMA base because, again, she was different compared to when fighters are being interviewed compared to like Errol Hawani, right? Errol Hawani is a journalist, right? So he's going to ask journalism type of questions. And even though I do find his interviews to be interesting because he really knows what he's talking about, a lot of the other MMA media won't ask really tough questions because they're afraid to get their credentials revoked by Dana White, so they refuse to ask hard-hitting questions. Nina Drama's on the complete opposite side of that, to where it's just all fun questions, all silly questions. Questions that like, will you read Gen Z brain rot or smash or pass? Stuff like that. It was a nice break from the typical media, MMA media that you would see. She became really the cool girl of combat sports. At least that's what I would deem to be the cool girl of combat sports. She became the one that could hang with the boys and even the girls too. She does interviews with women who are part of the UFC, women UFC fighters, but the ones that go viral the most are the ones with the men. She laughs at edgy jokes. She goes along with innuendos. She doesn't really call anyone out, and it all adds to her cool girl aesthetic. She's beautiful, funny, and approachable. The perfect formula for male fans who want a woman around but not involved. And for a while, I feel like there wasn't much controversy with her. It worked perfectly until it didn't. Because the cool girl act, over time, especially with the added up of certain controversial things that she's allowed on her platform, but over time, we started to notice a little bit of a shift when it comes to her and her content and the way that people felt about her. Because the cool girl only works when you don't step out of line. Once you start taking up space or quote unquote taking interviews from real journalists, once you become too visible, the same audience that loved you and grown your platform starts to tear you apart. And that's exactly what happened. The MMA world is very hyper masculine. Again, there are, of course, women that are within the sport, and they've had stars like Ronda Rousey throughout the sport's history, but let's be honest about its fan base. It's very much male dominated. And a lot of that male domination spills over into the MMA media. Female journalists, ring girls, content creators, they all face similar things: being undermined, sexualized, and dismissed for just existing. For Nina, a lot of the criticism that she gets is that, a lot of her content, like she'll make like sexual jokes about like she'll make sexual like feet jokes or something like that. And people will say, oh, doesn't she know that she has such a young male audience? And does she know what she's doing to that audience? Or they will see her maybe like laughing at a joke of a fighter or like dancing with Alex Pereira and John Jones. And they'll say, she's pushing 40, by the way. She's not 40. But anyway, she's pushing 40, by the way. Or accuse her of sleeping with every fighter that she's ever done an interview with. Or they'll be like, oh my God. And like her husband is the one who like films these videos. I feel so bad for her husband. I feel so bad for her boyfriend because she's doing an interview and it just so happened to have a joke that a 13-year-old would find to be funny. Like, I'm confused on why this is all of a sudden a big deal. And the tough part about going back to what I was saying earlier about, to me, all of that criticism is completely unfair. To me, it sounds like a bunch of men or boys who will never probably be in the same room as their favorite fighter, and they're mad that she gets to. That's pretty much what a lot of them sound like. But I do want to talk about a situation that happened with MMA Guru. As you can tell on this channel, I do not like that man. I think a lot of women don't like that man, but him and Nina actually went back and forth at one point where it felt like where they were going back and forth and MMA Guru was really going at her to me in a way that felt very misogynistic. And I still feel that way. I still feel like a lot of the criticism that she gets is very misogynistic. At the same time, she allows people like Sean Strickland on her platform, who is extremely misogynistic and has shown major disrespect even to the very fighters of an organization that he's a part of. And it's tough because you're sitting there like, okay, I get, your hate for MMA Guru, right? But at the same time, it feels like MMA Guru and Sean Strickland are very similar in a way. It feels like they would have the same politics, and I'm confused on why one is your best friend and one you spent time denouncing. It's just odd to me. I think odd to a lot of women. It's also like her, and like, listen, I'm just gonna get political on this channel, so deal with it. It's also like her support for Donald Trump as well, where you're like, as a woman who very much so out there working a job, being outwardly sexual in a way, it's odd to me that you would support a guy. I don't know. Are you support a regime that would be the complete opposite of everything that stands for? But I also think personally, and my husband pointed this out, was that I think that she mainly only supports Donald Trump because Donald Trump supports the UFC, and the UFC and Donald Trump are like in bed with one another. And like anytime that Donald Trump shows up to like a fight, like MMA fighters basically just like drop to their knees and like basically kiss his feet. So I think that she kind of just does the same thing. So I think that's kind of what that is, but just gonna leave that there. What else with some of the criticism that I hear of Nina drama is that Nina is not one of us or one of them, right? She's a model who sort of like wandered into the space. And she's made it clear that she hasn't been like this lifelong UFC fan, but she was an outsider who came into it with a big platform and got the opportunities that she got. And yes, part of her access and as well as her popularity is because she's beautiful and because she has already a very large following. But that's true across entertainment in general and influencer culture, which Nina Drama is an influencer. At the end of the day, she's not a journalist, right? She's an influencer. And that's just how the space works. And it's also, again, not her fault. It's really the UFC's fault. What we've been seeing lately, especially when it comes to Dana White doesn't want to be surrounded by actual journalists who are going to push back on things that he says. He doesn't want to be surrounded by those people, if you haven't noticed, right? He'd rather be surrounded by influencers, or he'd rather threaten real journalists to about access to his fighters or access to his press conferences that only last for 20 minutes. And if they don't ask the right question or do the right thing, then they can't come to events, or he's going to bash them on other platforms. And so he wants to surround himself with influencers like Nina Drama, who's not going to step out of line, who's not going to ask fighters questions about fighter pay. She's not going to, ask them about, their political leanings, not going to ask them about gambling scandals. She's not going to ask any of those questions. And even if she does, she won't. She won't. She will never ask those questions. And that's just the way that the MMA media currently, the state is at. We are currently at a time where Dana White doesn't want people like Ariel Helwani to be. Ariel Helwani doesn't even go to the fights anymore. There's not real journalists that are within the world of MMA anymore because that's the way that Dana White has designed it. So don't blame Nina Drama for taking the opportunity. Blame Dana White for not wanting to have any real journalists ask real questions to these fighters. It almost kind of feels like MMA media treat Nina Drama as she's pretty enough to look at. She's like, it's almost like she's simultaneously desired, but then also disrespected. You get me? She has millions of followers, and I'm pretty sure a majority of them currently at this day are UFC fans. But then a lot of them are male UFC fans, but then there are also some of the people who were the very first to try and disrespect her. It's so odd. And it's definitely how women as a whole are treated within this MMA UFC media space. Pretty enough to look at, but not qualified enough to be taken seriously. Because yes, of course she asks silly questions and she's pretty. But like there's a lot of pretty women out there who could just ask silly questions and have that position. But I think that, one thing that a creator who I follow on TikTok said, and I actually really agree with this, is to do the kind of work that she does, you have to also be a charismatic person. I think a lot of people think that some of those more sillier, funny, comedic jobs are like really easy to get and like anyone can do that. But like, I personally, sorry about the shadow, I'm having to film this at night after work. I think that it's very easy to do that sort of job, but it's not. Not I personally, even though I know all about TikTok brain rot, I could never do Nina Drama's job personally. Personally, I could never do it. I'm not that charismatic. I get a little stage fright when I get on camera. I can never really do what she does. Just like not every fighter can be a commentator, as we all know, because we've seen some fighters attempt to be commentators and they suck, right? Just because a job may look easy to you doesn't mean that it's one that everyone can actually do. And I feel like some of the men that she lets on her platform don't help. Some of them openly joke about women's bodies, make sexual comments, and when Nina's around, she's expected just to laugh it off or think that it's funny or again, like be like, no comment. That's nothing to say about it. Because if she doesn't do any of those things, she's no longer the cool girl. She's a problem. One of the biggest criticisms of Nina Drama, going back to that, especially for women within the space, is how she interacts with certain men in the MMA media space. She's often friendly or supportive of fighters who have made controversial or sexist comments, sometimes even laughing along when they say things that are uncomfortable. And yeah, on the surface, that's frustrating. It feels like she's aligning herself with people who disrespect her and other women within the space. But I will also say it's complicated because when your entire job relies on access, when men who make these kinds of comments are also the ones who need to be interviewed or who get you the interviews or get you the views and access, or the shout outs or agree to be on your platform, pushing back can cost everything. That's really the double bind women in male dominated industries have to walk. If you notice, especially like if you take your mind like outside of MMA media, if you notice a lot of women that are within the space talking about male dominated sports, basketball, football, or at least male like NBA, right? Not WNBA, but NBA. You notice that a lot of the women who were in these spaces aren't the ones having the more extreme takes. And if they are, you do notice that they get a lot of pushback from men. A lot of the women, especially like towards the early 2000s when they are within the space of covering male sports, they'd be the ones like sitting in the middle, just like the one bringing up the topic and being like, hey guys, let's talk about this player. And then they'd be the one going back and forth, and they really wouldn't have much of an opinion or commentary themselves. They're just like sitting in the middle. And oh, how do you feel about that? And what do you say about that? Stephen A. Smith, that was kind of their position and their job. And it's shifted and changed now to where we have women who can have their own platforms and have their own say and voices within a community. But you're really seeing that that number is so small because male fans of a sport can be brutal, especially to women. I feel like a lot of the attacks towards women are so much more personal than they are to men. Because if you speak up, you're deemed sensitive, or you're a man hater, or you're fake, or you're a pick me. Or you're a bitch. Or for me, when I made my video about Raja Jackson, I got a shit ton of very racist comments. And then I also got comments telling me that, what did he say? It was something to the effect of like, women are the ones that are too sensitive, right? And it's like, I'm commentating, like, I came a lot of time to that video. I came to that video very much so kind of being like, talking about the justice system, and all of a sudden, like, the men turned it into the comments about how, as a woman, that women are too sensitive and the other racist things, right? It's like I can't even cover and talk about a sport that I've been following for like longer than most of you. The cover a sport that I've been watching for almost 10 years now without hearing commentary of men trying to bring up something else, you know? When you work in a boys' club, every reaction is graded. Laugh too hard, you're desperate for male approval. Don't laugh enough, and you're uptight. And that's really the impossible line that Nina is walking. I also saw a video from this woman to where she said that she got blocked by Nina Drama because she had put something in her comment section that was like, and I agreed with her being upset at what Nina did during the fight week of Marab and Umar when they had their fight. She posted a video where she had an AI Umar like either sitting next to her or dancing next to her. I have to find the video. And she was sort of like doing her whole shtick about, with like an AI fake version of Umar. And this girl, rightfully so, gave her some criticism of being like, "What the hell are you doing? Like this guy, these people don't want to be interviewed by you, and you can see why." But then she also sort of like went into misogyny by like bringing up chest and like other things like that, where it's like, you don't have to use misogyny to like criticize someone. Like, it's rightfully so. It's not okay to do a deep fake AI of anyone without their consent or without their approval. That's already wrong. But you don't have to use misogyny in order to like stick it to her. You know what I mean? Nina's story, or Nina's place within this MMA space, is bigger than her. It's a mirror of what happens to women who build their careers in male spaces. She's not a villain. She's a reflection of the system. Because the truth is, the UFC and MMA media don't make room for women like her unless they can be contained. Fun, flirty, but never disruptive. You see this almost with Ronda Rousey, to where there is a lot of criticism you can give of Ronda Rousey, 100%. But I think that another reason why Ronda gets a lot of sometimes justified hate, but sometimes not justified hate, is because she's not a woman who's going to sit by and be quiet and play by the rules and allow others to construct the narrative around her. And I think that's another reason why some of the MMA fan base doesn't like her. Again, there's a lot of hard criticism you can't give of Ronda Rousey. But I also think that another reason why fan bases really sort of like completely dismiss her, don't talk about her, or, always scrunch their nose up when talking about her, is because of the fact that she's not some docile, quiet girl who chose to never stop talking, I guess. Because when a woman stops playing by those rules, she's labeled difficult, old, irrelevant, and fake. Nina's presence also shows us about conservative media, especially around sports. It thrives on that cool girl trope. As in, I'm a cool girl. You can say whatever you want around me, and I'm not going to get offended like all those other annoying liberal girls, right? Like, you could say whatever you want around me. Haha, I'm just going to laugh it off. Hee hee. That type of cool girl. She's there to entertain, not to challenge, to distract, not to disrupt. I see a lot of people also like compare her to Helen Yee. And you can really tell that like Helen Yee has been like covering this sport for a very long time. And you can really truly tell that she is a fan. But even within herself, she has to fall within those lines as well, right? She's not there to challenge, because if she's there to challenge, then she might not get access, right? She's there to, I hate to say this, but almost like, with Donald Trump, right? Like, he's going to distract you over here with this thing over here that he's doing gonna catch all of your attention. Nina's there to be like this, like, haha, like your favorite fighter is saying, internet brain rot humor, haha, so funny, hee hee. Um, and not disrupt by like asking that fighter about fighter pay or CTE, or, why is it that a lot of legends of the sport deal with so much hate and negativity? Why is it that a lot of fighters feel like they can't retire or they don't want to retire? What are you doing for those past veterans, besides putting them in the Hall of Fame? What are you doing for those veterans that were essential parts of making the sport to where it is today? Instead of just, not just putting them in the Hall of Fame, like, what are you doing for them? Are you giving them extra support after their career is over? Are you giving them mental, like, what about shit? What about, Bryce Mitchell, who is a character within himself, recently like had this whole thing where he was talking about how he like broke his nose, and it was like he's like, I don't want to go to the doctor or the hospital because it's super expensive and I don't want to have to like deal with that. And it's like, Bryce Mitchell has been a part of the UFC for like, fuck, how long? Like maybe 7, 8 years. And you're telling me that this fighter who has fought on many of main cards of the UFC doesn't want to go get his nose fixed because he doesn't want to pay for it? And it's like, why is it that Bryce Mitchell is having to like think about that when he's part of this organization, to where if it was LeBron James, which granted LeBron James is LeBron James, but like you think about any a member of like the NFL, right? Like if one of them broke their nose, especially when Bryce Mitchell was training, it wasn't like he was like out like fishing and broke his nose or some shit. He was like training for the very sport that he's in, and he got his nose broken, right? If that had happened at a practice, at a football practice, a part of the NFL, I'd be like, no problem. Like, oh, so and so just got his nose like popped back in. You know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty sure, when injuries happen in an NFL game or outside of, or like NFL practice, right? Their teams got them, right? Like, or the NFL has them. They don't have to worry about their medical bills and shit. Why is it that someone like Bryce Mitchell, who again has been a part of many UFC, like a very popular fighter within the whole shit, why is it that he's worried about his medical bills? What the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? Yeah, Nina Drama's never gonna ask that question. Love her, but Helen Yee's never gonna ask that question. You know what I mean? Because they need to continue to get access to these fighters. They're never gonna ask that question. They're never gonna ask that question. Shit, a lot of MMA media were never gonna ask that question. That's not just on them, but especially Nina Drama, especially Helen Yee. They're not gonna ask those questions. And that's not their fault. It's the game they have to play. I think Nina Drama does her job and she does it well. I think Nina Drama does her job and she does it well, personally. But her job itself, especially in this new MMA media landscape and space, is built on a foundation of sexism that forces women to constantly perform submission socially, professionally, and emotionally. Like I said earlier, at the end of the day, Nina Drama is not a villain. She's not a bad person. She's not a slut or a whore or a bitch, but Nina Drama, as in like her platform and where it's at, is a part of the very symptom of where current MMA media is at. She has played the game the way women in MMA media are expected to play it. Be likable, stay pretty, don't challenge the men, but truthfully, the game is never built for her to win, because in a media space that is obsessed with dominance, women like Nina are forced to perform submission, whether they realize it or not. And the saddest part, even when they play the rules like Nina has done, the audience still finds reasons to hate her. That's the real quote unquote problem with Nina Drama. It's not her personality, not her looks, or her jokes. It's that she's surviving within a system that never wanted her to thrive. And that system will always make her the problem for existing inside of it. And that's it. That's all I have to say. Like I said, I think that Nina Drama has a place within MMA media. I think that people give a lot of unfair hate to her. I think that, it also kind of plays into the fact that there's like definitely a Venn diagram when it comes to UFC fans and conservative men who are also maybe incels who like hate women or think that women should just be seen and not heard. I think it also is a lot of men who wish they could have access to like their favorite fighter, who will never get access to their favorite fighter. And so they decide to take it out on a woman because it's easier, instead of talking to that fighter and being like, why won't you give me an interview? I think it's also that. I think it's also the fact that she's good looking and knows it. I think that people are mad at her when they should be mad at the scope of where we're at in MMA media. I think that you should be blaming a lot more on Dana White. I will always say that. I think he's a main culprit in why MMA media is where it's at today. Like, you think about UFC Fight Week, it's a joke. Oh my God, it's such a joke. It doesn't matter how like big the card is, it's always a fucking joke, right? You get like a Nina drama interview, embedded episode, and then a 20-minute press conference where it looks like Dana White doesn't want to be there. And then boom, fight. That's it. You get Nina drama episodes embedded, and then a press conference where Dana White doesn't look like he wants to be there. Where the journalists are kind of told not to ask tough questions. Like, you look back in the day when Conor McGregor was like hitting his peak in fame, right? The reason why those press conferences were so like crazy, and like you see them on like the best lists of like best comebacks, blah blah blah, like the reason why they were so hyped up wasn't just because of the personalities. It was also because journalists were actually allowed and were able to ask journalistic type of questions. Or people were just like allowed to say the most oddest things to these fighters and like were allowed to kind of like show a little personality when they're asking a question. And to me, it just feels like Dana White is just like in a rush to get out of there and like doesn't want to be there and like would rather be talking about Power Slap or some shit. And that's why he just like makes those press conferences like 20 minutes and like he just pops on out. Like, I feel like Dana White, as a promoter of the event, hates to be there. Like, he hates to be there. He doesn't want to be there, and it shows. My husband just got home with groceries, so that's it for this video. I have to go and help him put the groceries away. But thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. I think. I hope. Bye.